Hey everybody, my name is Brendan Noble and I'm a young adult author. I just want to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving and I hope everyone's NaNoWriMo has been going well this month. I know I failed mine, but that's okay. I've been doing a lot of editing and working on these videos. But for all of you that are hitting those 50,000 words, congratulations, and I hope everyone's finishing off the month strong. At the end of this year, I wanted to discuss about the top 10 authors in the young adult genre heading into the next year to see where the authors are right now. This is just a snapshot that rankings could change at different times, but this is based off the numbers I've been looking at the end of the year about over the past week, mainly based on Amazon's numbers. So some of these numbers might be different than you'd see elsewhere. My goal of looking at the top authors is to see sometimes some of the trends that we're seeing. What authors are selling well? Are they writing in a certain genre? Is there a certain trend that's going really well that this author writes in? And looking at some of the top authors can show what genres are selling really well. Coming in number 10 in the rankings is Jamin Eve. She's an urban fantasy and paranormal romance author, and overall she's ranked 27th among authors in terms of paranormal romance books, and about 29th when it comes to fantasy ebooks. So she's selling very well even beyond just the young adult category. Some of her biggest series are the Titan Saga series, which she's written with Leah Stone, the Supernatural Academy series, and the Dark Legacy series. And a lot of these series are really hitting on that trend of paranormal romance, and it's really why she's seen a lot of success, especially in the ebook category, which is why her ranking is so high there. Her most recent release is called Releasing the Gods, which is part of the first book in the Titan Saga series that she's releasing alongside Leah Stone. Coming in at number 9 in the rankings is Jillian Dodd. While Jillian doesn't write exclusively in the young adult category, as she also writes new adult and adult books, she's become very popular for her contemporary romance, and also she started dipping her foot into spy thrillers as well, which is an interesting mix for an author. Some of her best-selling young adult books are the That Boy series, the Kieden Chronicles, and then her newest thing, the spy thriller one, is called Spy Girl, which is not as selling as well as some of her contemporary romance, but it's kind of unique to see an author mixing in with different categories like that. It'll be interesting to see how much success she has outside of her normal category of contemporary romance. In Jillian Dodd's most recent book that was released actually 3 days ago on November 26th was That Ring, which is the 5th book in the That Boy series. Coming in number 8 in the rankings is Sarah J. Maas. Sarah is a fantasy and paranormal romance author, and she's best known for her A Court of Thorns and Roses series, as well as her Throne of Glass series. And Sarah J. Maas's most recent book is called The World of Throne of Glass, which is a companion novel to the Throne of Glass series. Number 7 is Neil Shusterman. Neil is a dystopian author best known for his Ark of Scythe series and the Unwind dystology, which are both 2 dystopian series. Neil's the top-ranked dystopian author in young adult, and one of the only ones that's still hanging on to near the top of the rankings. A lot of the other authors that only write dystopian have found themselves slipping down, so he's kind of been fighting against a trend that seems to be going against dystopian books, which is kind of ironic and hard for me to say as a dystopian author myself, but it's a hard trend that currently is going more towards fantasy and less away from dystopian. More away. Neil's most recent book is The Toll, which came out at the start of November, which is the 3rd book in the Ark of Scythe series. Number 6 is Holly Black. Holly is a fantasy author well known for her The Folk of the Air series and the Spiderwick Chronicles. Holly is also ranked number 78 on Amazon in terms of book sales among all authors, which is a pretty impressive total for someone who just mainly writes in young adult fantasy. Holly's most recent book is The Queen of Nothing, which is the 3rd book in her The Folk of the Air series. Number 5 is a well-known name, and that's Brandon Sanderson. So a lot of you might wonder why Sanderson isn't going to be higher in the rankings, and that's because he writes books outside of young adult often, but he is writing in young adult as well more recently. Brandon's written everything from sci-fi to fantasy, but largely the 2 biggest series that have sold well among young adult books for him are the Skyward series and the Reckoners series. Even though all of his books aren't in young adult, it's worth noting that he is 24th in terms of books sold total on Amazon and number 10 in sci-fi and fantasy overall. So he's a really well-selling author, and the fact he's getting into the young adult genre shows how important and large the young adult genre is, even for major authors that write largely adult. Sanderson's most recent book in the young adult market is Starsight, which is the 2nd book in the Skyward series. Coming in at number 4 is Philip Pullman. Pullman's been around for a long time and he's been writing for a long time. His most popular book is The Golden Compass, which is the first book in the His Dark Material series. And he's also well known, though, for the Book of Dust series. It's also worth noting that he's coming in about 59th overall in terms of book sales overall on Amazon, which again shows that he's a young adult author that's selling very well across a lot of age genres. And Pullman's most recent book is The Secret Commonwealth, which is the second book in the Book of Dust series. And that came out in about early October. Coming in at number 3 is Rick Riordan. While Rick Riordan writes largely middle grade fiction, a lot of his series can be also considered young adult, so he does fall under these rankings as well. And Rick Riordan is really highly ranked. He's a number 27 in books overall on Amazon, which is really high, especially for a mid-grade author. And Riordan's a fantasy author well known for his Percy Jackson series, The Heroes of Olympus, and The Trials of Apollo, among a lot of other series as well. His most recent book follows along, continuing his mythological series, The Trials of Apollo, and the book's name is Tyrant's Tomb, which came out at the end of September of this year. Number 2 is Bella Forrest. So technically, Bella Forrest isn't a single person. She's a writing conglomerate of multiple writers that managed to pump out books at a ridiculous pace, but she needs to be included in the rankings because they are best-selling books, and she has a lot of best-selling series. Bella Forrest is best known for her paranormal romance, and she has a lot of books and different series, but some of the best-known ones are the Harley Merlin series, the Darklight series, and the Shade of Vampire series, which is 83 books long right now, which is kind of ridiculous. And not only is she ranked highly in young adult, she's actually the number 1 fantasy author when it comes to selling ebooks, the number 2 fantasy author of books in general, and number 4 in ebooks in general. So that just shows that this group of people, this conglomerate under Bella Forrest, are selling a ridiculous number of books. And under the YA title, managed to sell and push out a lot of series and a lot of books that are selling extremely well. In fact, 16 out of the top 100 books in the YA ebook rankings come from this author, which is a really impressive total. And number 1 is kind of obvious. It's J.K. Rowling. J.K. Rowling is obviously a fantasy writer, well known for her Harry Potter series that has continued to push her to fame and continued to sell extremely well years and years after initially coming out. Even after her release of the Crimes of Grindelwald series, it is not sold even close to as well as Harry Potter, but those Harry Potter books are keeping her at top of the rankings. In fact, those books are selling so well that she's the number 2 author in all books in general on Amazon. She's the number 1 fantasy author in terms of books in general. That is amazing considering how few books she's actually released, and that just shows the power of how well Harry Potter has really sold. So quickly, what are some of the trends that we can see out of these top 10 authors? And first of all, I think something obvious is that fantasy is by far the best-selling genre in young adult fiction. Dystopian only had Neil Shusterman inside the top 10, and sci-fi only had Brandon Sanderson, who also writes fantasy. So really, it's paranormal romance under fantasy and epic fantasy are those 2 really big categories, and they're continuing to be large trends. So much so that the top 2 fantasy book sellers in the entire Amazon bookstore are both young adult authors. It shows the power of young adult fantasy right now and how big of a genre that can be for both young adult readers and beyond. As much as that can be bad news for us that are sci-fi writers or dystopian writers, what it does mean is that those books can sell well, but we're not potentially going to sell as well as those really top categories that have a lot more broad of a reach. And that's okay. So that's all I have for you guys this week. Next week, I'll be discussing the genres and subgenres under the fantasy category and what some of the top authors are in some of those niches and what some of the trends are within those subgenres. As always, if you like this video, please like and subscribe down below. I'm going to be continuing to come out with videos every Friday. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody, and I hope your Black Friday and Cyber Monday shopping involve as little black eyes as possible. See ya.